UConn hasn't played anyone of substance yet, and that's not starting today. We'll tell you why UConn will dominate Memphis in Maui. You're locked on.
You are Locked On UConn, your daily podcast on the UConn Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for making Locked On UConn your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Before we dive into today's show, quick update from us. Again, the last month and a half have been, and literally the last 2 months have been incredible. We're thrilled to give back and have our support be helping others with donating 10% of our revenue to Husky Ticket Project, helping send kids to UConn men's and women's basketball games and football games. We also make a monthly donation to Bleeding Blue for Good and hope you'll consider supporting them as well. We're the only podcast that shares a portion of our revenue to charity as well as giving back to NIL collectives. If you're enjoying the show, please take a moment to subscribe and follow wherever you listen. Thanks for making Locked On UConn your first listen every day. Special shout out to my everydayers. Today's episode is sponsored by FanDuel. FanDuel, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet and get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com to get started. Okay. As UConn prepares to take on Memphis, the stage is set for a game that could provide a significant litmus test for both teams. Memphis comes into this matchup as a team with undeniable talent, but also a track record of inconsistency. For UConn, this game isn't just about another win. It's about reinforcing their identity as a championship caliber team, and proving that any opponent, especially one with Memphis' strengths, must be taken seriously, but handled quickly. Looking at Memphis' last game against San Francisco, there's a lot to unpack. Memphis started slowly. Does that sound familiar, UConn fans? Because we have too. Falling behind 10-1. That hasn't happened to us, but we also haven't played anybody. Not that San Francisco is a juggernaut, but I digress. They trailed early 14-7 with 11 minutes left in the first half. They only had 7 points. Despite stretches where they went without scoring for 4 and 6 minutes, Memphis managed to grind out a win. And thanks largely to individual moments of brilliance rather than consistent team play. They relied heavily on players like PJ Haggerty to create or shoot long threes, with Musa Cisse got by on cheap buckets down low against a undersized and under-athletic, if you will, that's not a word, San Francisco. San Francisco, meanwhile, was able to really get anything they wanted on offense and had plenty of opportunities. But the score at half was 31-22. And San Francisco shot 3 of 16 from three-point range in the first half. If they make 3 more of those shots, they're up about 17 points against Memphis at halftime. And when you really break it down, 11 of those 16 attempts were either open looks, uncontested, or defended with weak closeouts. Memphis wasn't exactly playing lockdown defense, being down 9 at halftime. They were vulnerable. And this is where UConn should be licking their chops. I guarantee you the coaching staff saw that Memphis game, and they see opportunities to attack the juggernaut of Memphis, the jugular of Memphis early. Memphis is a team that struggles to contest shots effectively. UConn has the tools to get whatever they want offensively. If San Francisco can manipulate them on offense, a team that hasn't won a national championship since Bill Russell was, roaming the corridors of the San Francisco Dons campus, the key is simple: get open looks, knock down shots, and we have that capability. This Memphis team is also a tale of two halves, a little bit bipolar. 22 points in the first half, and then 46 in the second. When you dig a little deeper into that, and not just to be a stat guy or like a box score guy, when you actually watch the game, I watched that game because I'm a psycho. I'm watching Memphis, San Francisco at 11 midnight my time. San Francisco dropped their level, but Memphis only shot 35% in the second half. So they won that second half by 13 points, but they only shot 27% from three as well. Their surge wasn't a product of improved play, but rather their opponents just absolute decline. The Huskies, however, are not San Francisco, as you know. From an athletic standpoint and an efficiency perspective, UConn is a different beast entirely. Memphis's performance against a solid but inferior opponent to UConn like San Francisco shows that they are vulnerable to disciplined teams with depth and execution, and that's exactly what UConn brings to the table. Let's talk matchups. Memphis does have an advantage in the backcourt. High-volume scoring guards capable of heating up. We're all very familiar with Tyrese Hunter. He was the Texas team that we beat last year at Madison Square Garden. Very athletic, 6'3" shooting guard. PJ Haggerty leading them in scoring, 22.6 points per game. Didn't particularly have a great game against San Francisco, but he's lit up the scoreboard this year. But let's face it, their reliance on one or two key players to score the offensive load is something UConn has thrived against over the last two seasons. Defensively, Memphis doesn't value the ball the way UConn does. I mean, offensively, they don't. They, I think, had 17 turnovers against San Francisco. They're not consistent offensively. A lot of their action is running the pick and roll where they kind of kick to maybe even throw it over the top for like on a weak side for a long three. But as I mentioned, if we just look at that box score, I mean, it was overall, I think they shot 34% from the floor, 36% from the floor, and they eventually shot 36% from three overall. So, not exactly lighting it up. So this game is an opportunity for UConn to show that they're still who they are. Well-rounded, efficient, powerhouse that we've been all talking about during this title run, and also talking up in the offseason. From an offensive scheme perspective to depth, athleticism, the Huskies hold a clear edge. If UConn plays their game, moving the ball, creating open looks, dominating in transition, this feels like an 82-65 win for the Huskies. But let's be clear. If UConn were to lose to this Memphis team, it would raise serious red flags about their title defense. I know it's early, and it's not because Memphis is a bad team. They're far from it. But because these are the types of games that championship caliber teams win, because Memphis has vulnerabilities that align with what UConn's strengths are. This is the kind of opponent UConn has feasted on in recent years. Anything less than a convincing performance would demand a pretty hard look at where this team is headed. And Dan Hurley understands that. He understands what these stakes are. He's quoted in media down there as saying, these games are mirrors. They show you what you are, and they show you what you aren't. If you don't like what you see, you've got to do something about it. That's the mindset UConn needs to bring into this game. And it's not just about beating Memphis. It's about proving it to themselves and everyone watching that they're still a force to be reckoned with. And it's not just that they're playing these bye games against inferior opponents. The season starts today in a few hours. Let's take a quick break, and we're going to talk about how the foot stays on gas for Dan Hurley and his staff, even in Maui. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place the live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. All right, you're back on Locked On UConn. One of the most compelling aspects of Dan Hurley's coaching style is his relentless attention to detail. After UConn's last game, while most coaches would have taken the night to rest, Hurley and his staff stayed back to watch film. No shock to anyone in this Locked On UConn universe. And it speaks volumes about his commitment, not just to his team, but to the process of continual improvement. What did Alex Caravan say in the offseason? That he's more locked on and locked in than ever. Hurley is quoted as saying, "We don't just play the game and move on. Every possession tells a story. Every mistake, every success, it's all there on film. You have to confront it if you want to grow." This relentless approach is what sets Hurley apart. It's why his team plays with such intensity and why they've been able to achieve so much under his leadership. Watching film immediately after a game is about more than just preparation. It's about setting a tone, showing his players that the work never stops. Foot stays on gas. Penny Hardaway even commented on Hurley's approach, saying he's a grinder. You see it in how his teams play. They're disciplined, they're tough, and they don't take plays off. That starts with coach. High praise from a coach who knows a thing or two about building a winning culture. When I wrote that, I laughed to myself a little bit because, if I'm being honest, I don't think Penny knows what it's like to build a winning culture in college. I think he's been on winning teams. I think he knows what it's like to. I think he knows what it's like to build a winning culture. I don't necessarily know if he knows what it. I don't know if he has the constitution to do the stuff that Dan Hurley does, and that's nothing against Penny personally. My dad's in town. We were talking about how different players, even from our past, we have even though I didn't play basketball at a high level, I chose a different sport. I don't know if I could have been as good at basketball as I was in tennis, because I know I couldn't have played professionally. But but I guess the point is like we're a different, unique type of basketball family. We love basketball. My dad was a phenomenal high school player. He's got a press clippings from Meriden, Connecticut from the 60s when he was a senior in high school, where he made 11 shots in a row, all from three-point range, but there was no three-pointer. So he was 11 for 11 in the game and didn't miss. And they were all – my dad was a zone buster. He was a good shooter, and so was I. But we talked about how growing up, whether it was Calhoun and now Hurley, we knew some players that got recruited by Hurley and that were really good players, but didn't go there because it's just not for them. Being in a program where a coach tests you daily, constantly, every minute. Sometimes people don't have that constitution. And from a coaching perspective, you need kind of a psycho to build a program. Penny Hardaway is not a psycho. He's a phenomenal, like one of my favorite NBA players of all time. And, he's doing something admirable by being a coach in college and, and trying to build that Memphis program. But, I just don't think it's ever going to work there for him as far as to the success of that level. So that's just a diversion of me trying to be a little more deferential, because I love Penny and I don't want people to think I'm, crapping on him. He's a good guy, but to me, he's just not that good a coach. Because when you think about it, while the UConn men are out, using jet skis in Maui and, having a good time on a team bonding event with the managers and the players, Kamani and Luke and Hurley and Tom are in the film room. It's that greatness. It's about that talent. And I'm not saying Penny doesn't watch film. And I'm sure if Dan was listening to this, he'd be like, this guy's crazy. But I think if you gave truth serum to Dan Hurley, he would tell you that Penny Hardaway is not, they're not the same. They're not built the same. So for UConn fans, this is the kind of leadership that really kind of keeps you talking about Dan Hurley. He isn't just building a team. He's crafting and continuing to build layers on top of his culture. And we've seen time and time again in sports, it's not just about the talent, because that comes and goes. Even this weekend when people were like, oh, you guys didn't play anybody, these Memphis fans, which I didn't think there were that many, were in my mentions talking about how, we played Alabama and UConn tough in the offseason in exhibition games. It's like, cool. And Memphis has talent. You're going to see it here in a couple hours. But talent comes and goes. And when this UConn wave of guys who have been in this program, guys who just got here and have kind of been really, that have embraced that culture, can carry a program when they have a lull, when they have an issue on a court, versus when an individual has a bad game. So, as we head into this pivotal game against Memphis, you can bet that Hurley has dissected every aspect of the Tigers game. So all the things I talked about in the first segment, I think he knows their tendencies. I would imagine he's going to be a little aggressive on these pick and rolls to not let guys go under screens against PJ Haggerty, to make him try to drive versus kind of pull up from deep, because I think you actually want him funneled to the middle, and I think you actually want him to attack Sampson and Terrace, not because we want to get them in foul trouble, but because we don't. It's very similar to the approach they had against anybody that had a scorer last year. And I'm going to pause for a second because I want to look something up and come back, and because there was one game in particular, and I want to reference the player and the situation and how we still won by 30. But okay. Didn't take me long because I knew exactly who we played. We played Seton Hall last year. It was a late season game, Big East game. Let me tell you, going into that game, I said it was a kind of a revenge game because they had lost earlier in the year with Klingen out and for most of the game before. And I'm going to talk about these box scores for a second. The player that ISO'd a lot in that game is no longer with Seton Hall. He transferred to Ole Miss, Dre Davis. He had 20 points. He was 6 of 10 from the floor. Good game, right? 1 of 2 from 3. Didn't miss from the free throw line. And then you had Kadari Richmond, who essentially had an average game, especially against UConn. And then the rest did nothing. Aduwuse, Amir Dawes only had 8 and 10. Nothing from the bench. So this is how UConn plays teams that are one-dimensional. Seton Hall last year was a solid team. Maybe even could have been an NCAA tournament team because they were 18 and 11 and 7 in conference. Thought they got shafted. But that's a perfect example of a team last year that this is the profile of Memphis this year. Some talented players, not yet really a team, and some days they put it together and they look like gangbusters. But for the most part, a team like UConn, who has killers everywhere, is going to continue to dominate teams like this and feast like we talked about in the first segment. So again, ISO, PJ Haggerty, put him in pick and roll, Tyrese Hunter, do that all you want. You might even be able to get away with what they had and get 35 points between the two of those guys and still lose by 30 points. I don't think UConn's as talented as this team last year because this was at a point at the end of last season where this team was just a machine. So that's why I said conservatively 82-65 win. I think they're an 8 to 10 point favorite. I would put on I would lay the points. But don't be surprised if it's under that. I'm just saying, like, this is a team that I'm not concerned is going to beat them. And this is the reason why. Because we have the tools and the talent to really dominate a team that's built around talent versus system. So, and before I get to the next segment, do yourself a favor. When you watch college basketball, watch any other team. And I challenge you, find anybody that's listening to this, anybody that listens to me every day, anybody that just kind of popped in and just was like, oh, this is interesting. Find me a team that runs a better offense or an offense that is as good or better than UConn's. I'm not saying we're the best offense in basketball yet, but we were last year, and people sleep on that because we run a system and it's methodical. It's not, up and down all the time. It doesn't have to be run and gun. We still drop 90 a game because we have guys who can play. And so a system of players that runs action, constant action, is always going to be a team that runs isolation and only pick and roll where everyone stands around. Any other college basketball, I don't see any other team that is constantly moving the way UConn does. It just doesn't happen. So anyway, that's where we have the biggest advantage in all of this, in this entire beautiful sport, and why I'm always so bullish on when people are like, well, they haven't played anybody. Well, we're going to find out here in a couple hours. Anyway, I digress. We're going to talk one more segment, Penny versus Danny. I'm going to pay one last bill here with our pals at Game Time, and we'll be back after this. There's nothing like being at a game. I wish I was in Maui with some of my friends out there, feeling the energy of the crowd, the sound of the sneakers on the court, and the pure adrenaline when your favorite team hits that buzzer beater. Hope that's not the case today, but whether it's spotting celebrities on courtside, hearing the roar of the fans, or simply being part of the action, live sports are an experience you can't replicate at home. And it's not just sports, concerts, comedy shows, theater performances. It's all better live. Let me tell you about Game Time and the new Game Time Picks feature, which takes all the hassle out of finding tickets. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff. It shows you the best deals on great seats so you can focus on the fun, not the search. Think about it like this. You ever just scroll through Netflix and you're like, God, I've been looking for a show for like the last 20 minutes. This actually gives you a curated experience so you don't have to do that. So you can also get these things called super deals. It's an option that helped me lock in amazing seats at a fraction of the price. They have an app that shows you exactly where your seat view looks like. And then on top of that, Game Time has your back with the lowest price guarantee. It's if you find tickets for less, they'll credit you 110% of the difference. That's the kind of peace of mind that makes this app a must-have. Again, I've sent tickets to friends because, again, I get a lot of places for free. So this is I'm just telling you guys, I've used it in other things, comedy, going to different shows. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets, download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. So what time is it? Game time. Go check it out. Use the promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. All right, you're back on Locked On UConn. Last segment of the program. Penny Hardaway, one of my favorite players of all time. He has admiration for Dan Hurley that goes beyond the usual platitudes. In a recent interview, Hurley spoke candidly about what makes Hurley such a formidable coach. He's one of those guys, this is a quote from him, he's one of those guys who just doesn't stop. We've talked about this. You can see it in how his teams play. They reflect his personality. Tough, relentless, unafraid of the moment. Coming from a coach and a player of Hardaway, like Hardaway, I just think anytime you get that type of praise from a peer, no matter how good or bad a coach is, it's significant. So, Penny has tried to build Memphis into, I think what the vision is for him initially was to build them into a powerhouse, but that hasn't happened. But he understands what it takes to succeed at the highest levels as a player, and he's feeling his way as a coach. Sorry, indigestion. Oof. So for him to recognize Hurley's work ethic in the culture he's building at UConn, it's a testament, and a respect. It's a respecting for Hurley, and I think he's earned that respect from all of his peers there this week. Izzo, what's Auburn's coach? Bruce Pearl. So Hardaway pointed out they're not just a team that shows up; they're a team that expects to win. And that's a credit to Dan. He's brought that edge back to UConn basketball. And I think what he's alluding to here is that when Memphis and UConn played against each other in the AAC, because there were, quite a few matchups, there wasn't that edge. I love Kevin Ollie as a player, and I appreciate his contributions to UConn. Won a national championship as a coach. But I couldn't be happier with what UConn has, obviously, today. And his last quote was, when you play UConn, you're in for a fight. That's how it should be. That's what makes college basketball great. So in closing today, guys, with everything that's been said, this is where the real season begins today. It's the start of a stretch that will define not just who this team is, but who they can become. We've got one more tune-up game after Maui, but the next 3 games are pivotal. These 3 days before Thanksgiving will mirror, as Dan Hurley has said, a reflection of what this team truly is and what it isn't. The Maui Invitational, we've won it twice, going for our 3rd banner there. It's stacked with high-level competition, but as we talked about on our squad show, and as I've talked about a few times, it's stacked on the other side. We're not playing Auburn today. We're not playing North Carolina today. We're not playing Iowa State today. We're playing Memphis. And no disrespect, but this is a game when you're UConn and you're here. UConn is the king of college basketball. Memphis is here. Actually, here. You can't see it on the screen. You lose to Memphis today, and we might have to rethink some things. So if the Huskies leave Maui with the title, then all of these projections we've made here on Locked On UConn about their depth, talent, execution will start to crystallize. I think it'll be proof that this team has what it takes to defend their crown and impose their will on some of the best teams in the country and some of the teams that are kind of the pretenders. But if they fall short, it's not the end of the story. We're not going to freak out. But it's going to begin a deeper analysis. We'll dive into where things stand, what went wrong, what needs to happen next. And the one thing you can count on, Dan Hurley and his staff won't rest in their pursuit of greatness. We won't rest in bringing you the most thorough coverage and the sharpest predictions about this ball club. This Maui trip is about to be a phenomenal one. I'm happy for my friends like Big Larry, Penfield's out there, Mediocre Dan of All 22. I hope they're having a phenomenal time, and I hope it's a fruitful one. Seen a lot of winning UConn basketball. But for the team, UConn is still UConn, a program that thrives on what they're about: toughness, execution, unrelenting will. Be the best. Don't set the standard. We're not leaving with anything but another trophy. So whether we're celebrating a title or breaking down the gaps, you can trust that Locked On UConn will 100% be here every step of the way. We'll be back later in the day for a live reaction show. And then later tonight, UConn women at 7:30. So this is the passion outside of my kids and my family. This is the passion I have for this team is unmatched. So that wraps up another episode of Locked On UConn. Stay locked on, stay connected. Make sure those toughness meters are always rising. And a special foot on gas today. So, go Huskies.